It's early morning in London, sometime in the summer of 1665. You wake up before the sun, not because you're well rested, but because the street outside is too quiet. No carts, no shouting vendors, no drunken arguments spilling out of taverns, just silence. Then you hear it. A distant voice, slow, hollow, almost rehearsed. "Bring out your dead!" And suddenly you remember. The plague is here. Not rumors anymore. Not whispers from across the sea. Not something happening to someone else. It's in your street, maybe in your house, and there is no escape. London in the 17th century was one of the largest cities in Europe. Crowded, chaotic, alive in a way that felt unstoppable. Trade flowed in from across the world. People packed into narrow streets, stacked into wooden houses, leaning over each other like tired old men. It was messy, but it worked. Until it didn't. Because when disease arrived, this city didn't just struggle, it collapsed. Slowly, painfully, and in ways people didn't fully understand. And here's the uncomfortable part. The systems people trusted, the rules, the authorities, even their neighbors, those same systems became part of the danger. This isn't just a story about disease, it's about fear, survival, mistrust, and the strange ways humans behave when everything familiar starts to break apart. By the end of this, you'll understand what it actually felt like to live through the plague. Not just the deaths, but the choices, the small, desperate decisions that could mean the difference between living and disappearing without a trace. Most people think they know what the plague was like. They don't. Before we go deeper, I'm curious. What do you think would be harder to deal with? The disease itself, or the fear of everyone around you? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, real, human, uncomfortable history, subscribe to Before the Modern World. Because once you step into this world, you might not look at the modern one the same way again.
Imagine walking through London on a normal day, before the plague. The streets are tight, almost suffocating. Buildings lean inward like they're conspiring. Windows drip waste into the street below. The smell. It's not one thing, it's everything. Rotting food, animal dung, human waste, smoke. And people everywhere. Merchants shouting, children running barefoot, workers hauling goods from the docks. You brush shoulders with strangers every few seconds. There's no space, no distance. And that's exactly the problem. London wasn't designed for safety. It was designed for survival and trade. People lived where they could afford, which often meant entire families in a single room. Rats thrived in this environment. Fleas thrived on the rats. And no one really understood what that meant. Most people believed disease came from bad air, something invisible but almost atmospheric. If it smelled bad, it was dangerous. If it didn't, well, maybe you were lucky. So they burned herbs, carried flowers, avoided certain smells. But the real threat? It moved quietly, through fleas, through bites, through contact. And by the time someone realized they were sick, it was already too late. Here's the thing people often get wrong. The plague didn't feel like an immediate apocalypse. At first, it was subtle. A few deaths here, a few rumors there. People ignored it. They had to, because stopping meant starving. Work didn't pause for fear. So life continued, just slightly more tense than usual, until the numbers started climbing. And once they did, there was no slowing it down, because London had built itself into the perfect trap, and now the trap was closing. But the city wasn't defenseless, or at least it didn't think it was, because authorities had a plan, a system, one that was supposed to control the spread. Instead, it created a new kind of fear. Picture this. You're inside your home. Someone in your household starts feeling unwell, fever, weakness, maybe strange swelling.
You don't say anything at first, because saying something changes everything. Eventually, someone notices, maybe a neighbor, maybe a local official. And then it happens. Your door is marked, a red cross painted on the wood, along with words that feel like a sentence. Lord, have mercy upon us. From that moment, you are no longer free. The house is sealed. No one in, no one out, for weeks. This was one of London's main strategies: quarantine entire households if even one person showed signs of plague. On paper, it made sense. Contain the sickness, stop it spreading. But in reality, it turned homes into prisons. Imagine being locked inside with a sick family member, not knowing if you're already infected. Food is brought occasionally. Guards, called watchers, stand outside to make sure no one escapes. And people tried to escape. Of course they did. Some bribed watchers. Some climbed out windows at night. Others simply ran when no one was looking, because staying inside often felt like waiting to die. And here's the darker truth. Not everyone inside those houses was infected. Healthy people were trapped alongside the sick. Families watched each other decline, one by one, and there was nothing they could do. No doctors who could help, no medicine that worked, just time and fear. Some watchers themselves abandoned their posts. Others abused their power, taking bribes, exploiting desperation. The system meant to protect the city ended up spreading distrust. Neighbors began hiding illness. Better to risk spreading the plague than guarantee your entire household would be locked away. And just like that, the system broke itself. Because survival doesn't always follow rules. And when fear takes over, people stop playing fair. But quarantine wasn't the only thing shaping life in plague London. There was another system, quieter, but just as powerful. The counting of the dead. Every week, a list was published. Simple, cold, almost casual. The bills of mortality. Columns of numbers showing how many people had died, and from what. At first glance, it seemed helpful, a way to track the spread, to stay informed. But over time, these lists became something else, a kind of ritual. People gathered to read them, scanning for their parish, their street, watching the numbers rise. 1, 5, 20, 100. It didn't feel real at first, just numbers, until someone you knew appeared in them, and then it hit differently. But here's something most people don't realize. These numbers weren't always accurate. Deaths were often misreported, causes guessed.
Some families hid plague deaths to avoid quarantine. Others were simply overlooked. So while the official numbers were terrifying, the reality was worse. Far worse. And yet, people depended on them. Because uncertainty is harder than fear. At least numbers give shape to danger, even if that shape is misleading. For the wealthy, these rising numbers meant one thing: leave. And many did. As soon as the plague became undeniable, the rich fled the city, packed their belongings, escaped to the countryside. They had options. Most people didn't. Workers, laborers, servants. They stayed, because leaving meant abandoning everything, and often having nowhere to go. So the city didn't empty, it thinned unevenly. The rich disappeared, the poor remained. And that imbalance made everything worse. Because the systems left behind, guards, watchers, officials, they were stretched thin, underpaid, overwhelmed. Order began to slip. And when order slips in a place already full of fear, things get unpredictable, sometimes even strange. Because not everyone responded to the plague with caution. Some responded with denial, others with something close to madness. When reality becomes too much, people cope in strange ways. In Plague London, that showed itself everywhere. Some people became obsessively cautious, avoiding everyone, washing constantly, carrying charms or herbs. Others did the opposite. They gathered in crowds, drank heavily, laughed too loudly, almost as if pretending nothing was wrong could make it true.
And then there were those who turned to superstition. Astrologers claimed the plague was written in the stars. Fortune-tellers offered protection for a price. Quack doctors sold miracle cures, powders, potions, ridiculous mixtures that did nothing or made things worse. But people bought them, because hope, even false hope, is powerful. Here's something uncomfortable. Even educated individuals believed things we'd now consider absurd. Bleeding the sick, burning certain materials, avoiding specific colors or smells. None of it worked. But it felt like action, and doing something, anything, felt better than helplessness. Then there were the stories, harder to verify but repeated often. People abandoning family members, parents leaving sick children, servants fleeing households, and yes, the opposite too. People staying, caring, sacrificing themselves. The plague didn't just reveal fear, it revealed character. But even the strongest individuals couldn't control what came next, because eventually, death became impossible to ignore. Not just as an idea, but as a daily, visible presence. At some point, the city changes. Not gradually, suddenly. The carts return, but they're not carrying goods anymore. They're carrying bodies, covered sometimes, sometimes not. The call echoes through the streets again and again, "Bring out your dead!" It becomes routine, too routine. Mass graves are dug, large, deep pits where bodies are buried quickly, without ceremony. There's no time for proper funerals. No space for individual grief. Families lose multiple members in days. And after a while,
Even morning starts to feel distant, because it's everywhere, all the time. Church bells ring constantly. Gravediggers work through the night. The scale becomes overwhelming. And here's something people rarely think about. The people handling the dead, they were at risk too. Many died themselves, replaced quickly by others who needed the work. It became a grim kind of economy.
Death feeding survival. And still, life didn't completely stop. Markets operated, barely. Some businesses stayed open, because even in the middle of disaster, people need to eat, need to live. But everything felt fragile, like the city was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. And eventually, something did. At its peak, the plague wasn't just a disease. It was a force that reshaped the entire city. Social order fractured, trust dissolved. The systems meant to protect people, quarantine, reporting, enforcement, they all had unintended consequences. They created fear, isolation, desperation. And beneath all of it, a simple truth. No one was truly in control. Not the authorities, not the wealthy, not the careful. The plague didn't follow rules. It didn't care about status or belief. It moved where it could, and people adapted the only way they knew how. Some became cautious. Some became reckless. Some tried to help. Some tried to survive at any cost. And that's the part that lingers. Not just the deaths, but the choices. Because when you strip away comfort, stability, and certainty, what remains? What kind of person would you be in that world? Would you stay with your family, even if it meant risking everything? Would you run, hide, pretend it wasn't happening? The modern world feels stable, predictable, but it's built on moments like this, moments where systems failed and people had to decide who they were without them. And maybe that's why this story still matters, because the fear, the uncertainty, the human reactions, they haven't really changed. Only the setting has. So what was life like in 17th century London during the plague? It wasn't just death. It was tension everywhere. In homes, in streets, in decisions no one should have to make. It was a city trying to function while quietly falling apart. And yet people endured. Not perfectly, not heroically all the time, but realistically. Messy, flawed, human survival. So here's something to think about. Do you believe people today would react differently in the same situation? Or would fear, survival, and uncertainty push us into the same patterns? If you want to understand how moments like this shaped the world we live in today, subscribe to Before the Modern World. Because history isn't just a collection of events, it's a mirror. And sometimes, it shows us things we'd rather not see.